they don't just change the story of our lives, they become the story of our lives. Welcome to the Endlessly Elated Podcast. I'm your host, Kathleen Pagan, founder of Endlessly Elated, cook, designer, storyteller, and soon-to-be author. But at heart, I'm a woman endlessly curious about what it means to live with intention. Week after week, we'll slow down, reflect, ask life's big questions, and uncover the lessons that help us live more thoughtfully. Welcome to today's episode. Let's chat about defining moments. There are those moments that don't just happen to us. They're the ones that completely rearrange us. They come without any warning, without the decency of preparation, and then suddenly, everything we thought we knew about ourselves, about life, about what matters, shifts. I call these defining moments, markers in time, points of no return. They're the ones I believe divide our lives into before and after. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Perhaps it's before the call, the loss, the decision that changed everything. And then the after, the silence that follows, how the world keeps spinning while you're still standing still. After you realize that nothing will ever feel quite the same again, and if you're anything like me, when you start measuring time, not by days or years, but by simply what came before and what came after. I've come to understand that we like to think we build our lives in small, everyday choices, and in many ways we do. Of course we do. But I think it's these seismic moments that leave their mark on us. They're the ones that force us to pause, question, and choose again, even if we aren't ready to do so. They remind us how fragile and how sacred life really is. How it is to see the world through a lens we never asked for, and yet to carry on even when everything familiar feels so foreign. And somewhere in all that aftermath, we must start to piece together a new understanding of who we are. Hopefully, we're stronger and wiser, certainly, but one thing is for sure, we are definitely different. We are marked by what we've experienced and what still remains. But here's the thing. We will never be the same person twice. I know I'm not. Every one of these moments asks something new of us. It invites us to see ourselves differently, more deeply, to carry the lessons, the ache, the gratitude, whatever it is, into how we live now. Because life isn't built by the moments we anticipate. I think that would be too easy. But by the ones that undo us and still somehow teach us how to stand again. When I think about the moments that have defined me, it might not come as any surprise, especially if you've been following me for a while, but I've come to mark my life in two parts. BP, before my parents passed, and AP, after my parents passed. Both arrive as loss, and as you can imagine, the kind of loss that shakes the ground beneath you. And yet, they've become the very foundation I'm trying to rebuild my life on. When I lost my dad, something in me woke up. My dad was brilliant. He wanted to actually be an attorney, but ended up being an accountant because life had other plans. And I think that realization, that unfulfilled dream of his, did something to me. It made me promise myself when I lost him, and not before, and that part matters, because I didn't yet have the wisdom to grasp the finality of that kind of ending, but that I would live differently, that I would go after the things that made me light up and not the things that made sense on paper. It was like watching the blueprint of my life fade before my eyes and realizing I'd been following someone else's map all along. Whose? I have no idea. But for a rule follower like me, that is one tall order. So in the midst of my grief, I started building something new. I didn't know what it would become. I just knew it had to mean something. I yearned for it. It's actually how Endlessly Elated began, by the way. Not as a business, but as my pursuit to live in search of my happiness, hence the name. And just to give you a picture, I would sit on my couch for days, and truly it felt more like years, surrounded by silence and the kind of exhaustion that only grief brings. I was dazed, confused, unsure of who I was, with what I can only describe as a piece of me ripped away. Most days, I sat staring into the abyss, trying to make sense of life, my life. But even then, somewhere between the tears and stillness and all my random thoughts, there was this quiet reminder to keep reaching for joy even when everything hurt. To live in the pursuit of happiness even after losing so much of it. My dad would have wanted that for me. I know that for sure. I know he would have wanted me to live intentionally, to create with purpose, to not let fear or practicality be the loudest voices in my room. Those were rules I lived by, BP. To find meaning to my life. And then, years later, if one can be so unlucky, and I guess I am, I lost my mom. And when I did, I thought I understood what transformation felt like. But that loss, her loss, cracked me in a way I still can't articulate. It shattered me to pieces, pieces I'm still finding and picking up. I've come to believe that if my dad's passing pushed me to create, my mom's passing pushed me to shed. To stop hiding behind what was expected and stop trying to be everything for everyone. My mom was the most selfless person I've ever known. I know most daughters, if they've been blessed with a mother like mine, would say the same. But truly, my mom is the best person I've ever known. And by the way, I love you, Dad, just in case you are listening. I often think my dad hears me and thinks, what about me? But he was also everything to me. It's why I'll never quite make sense of my circumstances. But to give you perspective on why I say this about my mom, at her funeral, one I kept extremely private. I didn't even write so much as an obituary, partly because I could barely hold my own grief, let alone anyone else's. It didn't stop people from showing up. And I mean, flowers filled that room, sent by names I didn't recognize from people I'd never met. I still don't know how the word got out, but somehow it did. And in that moment, I understood the quiet reach of her kindness, how deeply she touched people without ever needing recognition. It was the most beautiful send-off I could have ever imagined, and I'll forever be grateful for it. And that was my mom, always giving, always doing. And here's where I'm going to be really honest with you. I used to get so frustrated watching her, feeling like she never gave herself enough permission to just be. I used to call her out all the time, telling her to stop worrying, to stop stressing others, and care for herself. But when she passed, I realized I'd become her in all the ways I said I wouldn't. Always pouring, rarely refilling, always pleasing, and rarely pausing. And that realization broke me. But like anything that breaks you, it also freed me. From that moment on, I decided I didn't want to keep living my life based on someone else's approval. I wanted to live it in truth, my truth. And that's what led me here to the Dominican Republic, another one of those moments. At the time, I told myself it was a change of scenery, but we all know I was running. From everything I knew, from the reminders of what was gone, from the version of myself that existed before it all fell apart. What I didn't know then was that the running would turn into finding my way. That this move, this completely unplanned, imperfect decision, by the way, 30 days, 2 suitcases, and no home waiting for us at our destination, would become one of the greatest blessings of my life. It's here that I learned to slow down, the kind that stops you in your tracks, to be more present, to begin coming to terms with losing both of my parents. More than 10 years after my dad, and just a year and a half after my mom. To stop rushing toward the next thing and start allowing what was meant for me to find me. The chase is something real. It's here I learned that stillness shouldn't stir anxiety after 42 years of being on this earth, but that it should bring me peace. And so when I look back at those defining moments, losing my dad, losing my mom, leaving behind the only life I've ever known, I see it so clearly now. These moments were each drawing a line between who I was and who I'd never be again. And so, of course, we all have those moments, the ones that draw harsh lines through the story of our lives into before and after. They might not look like loss for you. Sometimes they come as love or change or an unexpected choice. But no matter what, they will always leave us different from how they found us. Maybe you're thinking of yours right now, or maybe you're standing at the edge of one and don't even know it. You simply feel the ground shifting, not yet knowing what it will ask of you. It's a quiet realization that makes no sense to anyone but your soul. And can I just say I love that? And suddenly you'll start moving through the world differently, quietly. For me, it was almost skeptical. I reflect on how the very moments that bring us to our knees, whether through joy or heartbreak, are the ones that rebuild us. Not back to where we were, but into something more honest, more aware, forged by truth in a way we can never undo. It's here that we feel the full gravity of how we experience life. Isn't it funny how we convince ourselves into believing we hold control in one moment, only to realize we're completely at the mercy of something unknown in the next? And it is then, and only then, that we see that every after carries a sacred wisdom the before could never understand. I want to pause here for a moment. If you're listening on the free feed, this is where today's episode ends. To continue this conversation on what's next in the aftermath of it all, join me inside the subscriber space. You'll find the link in the show notes. Please make sure to follow wherever you're listening, and if you feel called to, share it with someone who might need it too. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be pausing next week for Thanksgiving, so I hope you have a lovely holiday if you celebrate it, and I'll meet you back here in 2 weeks.